Say that again.
Get that
Say
on tape.
one more time.
Get that on
Aaron
tape.
Donald is probably the best interior defensive lineman ever in the history of the game of
I
football.
told y'all that.
In a monumental moment last week, we bid farewell to one of the greatest players of all time. After a decade of dominance, Aaron Donald, the powerhouse defensive tackle for the Los Angeles Rams, decided to call it quits. His retirement announcement, "Quarterbacks Rejoice," perfectly captures the sentiment surrounding his departure.
2 years old to retire from football and, jump into the next step of my career in my life.
Facing Donald on the field was a nightmare for quarterbacks, a testament to his unparalleled skill and ferocity. But his journey to greatness wasn't always smooth sailing. Donald grew up in Pittsburgh, and he played high school football at Penn Hills High School, initially an offensive guard. Donald transitioned to his eventual pro position of defensive tackle. Despite being just 6'1", considered small for a DT, the University of Pittsburgh recognized his raw potential and recruited him into their program, a decision they never regretted. After a quiet freshman year in 2010, Donald quickly emerged as a fan favorite and one of the very best defensive players in the nation. Over the next 3 seasons, Donald would record 27.5 sacks, 63 tackles of loss, and force 6 fumbles. Donald was awarded the Bronco Nagurski Trophy for the best defensive player in college football and was named as a unanimous All-American for his efforts. He finished his college career helping Pitt to a victory over Bowling Green in the Little Caesars Pizza Bowl, with a final sack and 2 TFLs to close out a superb 4 years at the university. Donald was selected 13th overall by the then St. Louis Rams in the 2014 draft, behind notable stars like Odell Beckham Jr. and Khalil Mack. Despite the presence of other elite talents in his draft class, including Devontae Adams and Zach Martin, Donald quickly proved himself as the standout player of the group. From his early days with the Rams, Donald became a major part of their defense, securing his first sack in just his second game and finishing his rookie season with 9 sacks and 18 tackles for loss, earning him the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year award. Despite this impressive start, it's worth noting that this season may still be considered one of his worst, a testament to the consistently high level of performance he has maintained throughout his career. From here, Donald was voted as a first-team All-Pro in 8 of the next 9 seasons. The only year that he wasn't was the 2022 season, which saw him miss 6 games due to the only real significant injury of his career. For an entire decade, there was no one quite like Aaron Donald. And honestly, who knows when there will be again? Explaining Donald's greatness is difficult, as honestly, just looking at his phenomenal numbers don't quite do it justice. Donald recorded 111 sacks over his career, as well as 176 TFLs. These are truly exceptional, Hall of Fame-worthy numbers, of course, but they just don't convey the absolute game-wrecking ability that Donald possessed throughout this team. Number 99 was constantly double-teamed and then triple-teamed. It was the only way to deal with him, and even that didn't work sometimes.
Aaron Donald has 3, right? He has all 3. He has the inside, the outside, and the bull, right?
Unsurprisingly, Donald faced the highest rate of double teams in the league for many years. More than Javon Hargrave, more than Chris Jones, more than Calais Campbell, more than anybody. He was the most dominant of any of these. ESPN's Seth Walder posted a graph in 2021 showing the rate that defenders are double teamed and the extent to which they beat the men in front of them. Donald breaks this chart, existing on his own island in the top corner, away from the rest of the NFL's elite. One impressive stat about Donald is how well he does against double teams. In the last 5 seasons, his win rate when facing 2 opponents was 18%, while the average player's success rate against 1 opponent was only 17%. So, Donald was actually better against 2 opponents than most players were against just 1. Identifying what made Donald stand out is tricky. Despite his smaller size, he had exceptional strength, likely due to starting intense weightlifting with his father at age 12. Additionally, his remarkable speed, showcased by his 4.68-second 40-yard dash, was unmatched except for one instance by Buccaneers rookie Kalijah Kancey. Kancey, like Donald, is undersized for a DT. Donald's agility, technique, and elusiveness on the field may also set him apart from his peers. He's quick physically, but also mentally, with reactions that offensive linemen find it impossible to deal with. By the time the guard or the OT has reacted, Donald usually finds himself wrecking chaos in the backfield. In the NFL, there's no such thing as a player that is truly unblockable, but Donald is the closest we've seen for a long, long time. In 10 years, he's achieved a ludicrous amount, and he's the ultimate definition of a zero-ballot Hall of Famer. Every January and February, fans and sports writers pore over the list of men eligible for the Hall of Fame that year and dedicate column inches towards whether or not certain guys should be on their way to Canton, Ohio. But for Donald, there is no debate. Only 4 players at any position have more than his 8 first-team All-Pro selections. He made the Pro Bowl in every season he played, and he obviously made it into the NFL All-Decade team for the 2010s. He was also voted the top player in the league in 2019 by his fellow professionals, making him and J.J. Watt the only defensive players to do so. In a league increasingly dominated by high-powered offenses and elite quarterbacks, the fact that the top player in the league is an undersized defensive tackle is truly remarkable. Indeed, one of the best ways to appreciate Donald's greatness is just listening to the testimony of his fellow professionals. For 5 straight years between 2018 and 2022, Donald was the highest-ranked defensive player on the list, ranking no lower than 7th overall during that time. Like Jason Kelce, who himself is likely headed to Canton in 5 years' time, highlights just how universally respected Donald is within the league. On the 2019 show, Rams RB and All-Pro Todd Gurley was asked, what makes him so difficult to block? And 5 years into Donald's pro career, he just replied, no one's figured it out yet. And really, no one ever did. The new Atlanta Falcons head coach and ex-Rams defensive coordinator Raheem Morris summed up Donald's dominance nicely, describing his role on the Rams practice field. Morris claims that Donald absolutely ruins practices, and that they had to take him off the field just to let the offense play. I guess when you practice against Aaron Donald all week, games on Sunday seem a lot easier. But as tremendous as Donald had been through his first 8 seasons, the one thing he was missing out on was that Super Bowl ring. As a defensive tackle, there's only so much you can do to bring glory to your team, and some of the very best players the league has ever seen have ended up without a well-deserved title. The likes of Bruce Smith, who is one of Donald's contemporaries, in the greatest defender of all-time discussions, lost all 4 of his Super Bowls with the Buffalo Bills. Also, the likes of Barry Sanders, Dan Marino, and Randy Moss are all examples of truly transcendent players who went into the Hall of Fame without tasting title glory. Thankfully, Aaron Donald isn't one of those guys. Donald went into Super Bowl 53 against the New England Patriots as a man absolutely at the peak of his powers, having just won his 2nd straight Defensive Player of the Year award and recording a ridiculous 20.5 sacks. Donald was absolutely the man to watch for the New England offense. On the most part, Donald and his defense held up their side of the bargain and held Tom Brady and his team to just 3 points through the first 3 quarters. The only problem was that Jared Goff and his offense just couldn't get anything going at all. With one of the worst Super Bowls of all time, tied at just 3-3 with 15 minutes left, eventually it was New England who would make the breakthrough. This was a rare example of double teaming having at least some success on stopping Donald, with many in the media praising the outstanding performance of Joe Thuney on the Patriots O-line. On that drive, Brady, Rob Gronkowski, and Julian Edelman all combined to set up Sony Mitchell's game-winning touchdown, but Thuney's performance was arguably the most impressive part. Donald said so himself afterwards, saying that under young head coach Sean McVay, the Rams had transformed into one of the best sides in pro football, with one of the very best offenses. No longer was Donald confined to the 7-9 Jeff Fisher teams in St. Louis. Yet, ironically, his lack of a Super Bowl ring only added to his frustration. The Rams were a fixture in the playoffs in this time, making it to January football 3 seasons out of 4 between 2017 and 2020, but just not being able to get over that final hurdle, falling to the Falcons and Packers either side of that Patriots loss. In March 2022, the Rams made their way to get over that hump, making a blockbuster trade for Detroit Lions quarterback Matthew Stafford, sending 2 first-round picks and Jared Goff the other way. This was the Rams going all in, and for Donald, things were set up for one more tilt at playoff glory. After a blowout win in the wildcard round against the Arizona Cardinals, there was the small matter of a guy called Tom Brady and his defending champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers up next. Donald recorded a sack in the second quarter, as well as 2 TFLs and 3 hits on Brady, as the Rams survived an incredible comeback attempt to defeat the Bucs 30-27 and advance to the NFC Championship game against the 49ers. In that game at SoFi Stadium, Donald didn't have his biggest game, but he shone at the very biggest moment. With the Rams up 2017 with less than 2 minutes left, the season was on the line, with San Fran staring down the barrel of defeat. On 3rd and 13, Donald picked his moment, getting to Jimmy Garoppolo and nearly sacking him as he threw the ball up in desperation, and the ball was picked off by Trayvon Howard. The Rams had one more date with destiny against the Cincinnati Bengals in a rare home Super Bowl. It was time for him and his team to make amends for 2019, and he set about doing just that, picking up 2 sacks on Joe Burrow in the third quarter. And as the Rams battled to a 23-20 lead with a minute left, it was Donald who would end this one. With the Bengals at 3rd and 1 at midfield, Donald and Greg Gaines recorded a tackle for no gain, bringing up 4th and 1. This was destiny for Donald. He burst past the O-line and nearly hauled Burrow to the turf, forcing him to throw a desperation pass that went incomplete. Game, set, and match for the Rams. Donald ran away, pointing at his finger, demanding his well-earned ring. Everyone in SoFi that night knew what was coming, and no one could stop him. Aaron Donald had his ring, the icing on the cake for his legacy. When Donald retired this offseason, many couldn't help but be disappointed. After all, he was All-Pro again last year, and he's still one of the league's very best players. But ultimately, he just didn't have anything left to prove, and few could deny his right to hang up his cleats after 10 phenomenal years. The Los Angeles Rams now have to look for his replacement, but sadly for them, there is no such thing. Possibly the best praise for Donald comes from veteran Bills DT Kyle Williams, himself a 6-time Pro Bowler. When Donald was voted #1 in the NFL Top 100 in 2019, Williams said, "The most dangerous thing you can do is watch that guy do what he does, because you can't do it. Try to be the best version of you. Try to figure out what works for you. But don't watch that guy and think you're going to be able to pull these things off." Aaron Donald truly was a one-of-a-kind football player, and one of the very best anyone has ever seen. Seahawks, 49ers, and Cardinals fans in particular will be extremely relieved not to see that number 99 twice a season. As the Rams said, quarterbacks across the league are rejoicing that one of the greatest ever to do it isn't a problem anymore. Aaron Donald, truly one of one, an all-time great, and one that will be impossible to replace in Los Angeles. Where do you think Aaron Donald ranks among the best defenders ever? How big a loss is this for the Rams? And who's the best DT in the league now that he's gone? Let us know in the comments.